You won't believe what happened when Jack Reacher, wearing just a basic grey t-shirt, walked quietly and almost invisibly into a luxury business jet store, just to take a look at the most exclusive models in the world. But he only had to cross the threshold for the trial to begin. A blonde, snobbish, sharp-tongued salesman with an upward glance evaluated Reacher with disdain. He couldn't imagine that such an ordinary-looking man would even dream of buying something there. But what he didn't know was who was actually standing in front of him. And when the truth came out, the turnaround was brutal, the outcome almost unbelievable. Before we dive deep into this amazing story, comment below from where you're watching. And if you enjoy impactful narratives like this, subscribe to the channel now. There's another breathtaking story waiting for you tomorrow. The store's air conditioning kept the room surgically cold, almost symbolic of the coolness and luxury that hung in the air. The glass walls reflected the gleam of the jets, veritable aerial fortresses made for those who not only have money, but power. Each plane was not just a means of transportation, it was a trophy of absolute prestige. It wasn't about prices, it was about status. The few who dared to enter this showroom carried bank accounts with at least 9 digits. Magnates, kings, owners of empires. It wasn't a place for just anyone. That's why, when Reacher walked through those automatic doors, the impact was immediate. He walked with the calm of someone who had seen a lot, as if this place didn't intimidate him at all. His look? Totally out of the ordinary. A worn-out t-shirt, old jeans and worn-out sneakers. Nothing there said buyer, let alone millionaire. The blonde salesman, tall, slim, wearing a suit worth more than a popular car, was paralyzed at the sight of the figure. His eyes quickly scanned Reacher. He didn't recognize the man, but he did recognize what he thought was a problem. Discreetly, he glanced at the security guard in the corner of the store, a burly man in black, ready to act. But as Reacher posed no clear threat, he just stayed alert. The salesman took a deep breath and, as if Reacher's presence had contaminated the elegance of the place, straightened his tie and walked over to him. His tone? Polite, but full of superiority. "Good afternoon, sir," she said, forcing an icy smile. Reacher replied calmly, a slight, almost ironic smile on his lips. "Can I help you with something?" The word help sounded like a condescending slap. It was clear this salesman didn't see Reacher as a customer, but as a curious outsider. Reacher watched the jets with genuine attention. He admired the details with the eyes of someone who understands precision and engineering, like the ex-military man he is. He turned calmly and said, I'd like to see some models." The reaction was immediate. The salesman arched an eyebrow in disbelief. A debauched chuckle escaped. "Models," he repeated as if he had heard a joke. He examined Reacher again, the ordinary t-shirt, the dirty sneakers, and then he let go. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" It wasn't a question. It was a message. "You don't belong here." But Reacher, unfazed, answered without changing his tone. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." The salesman tried to disguise his annoyance, but the tension was building. In a forcefully gentle voice, he delivered the final blow. "You see, sir, the jets here are extremely expensive." He made a point of emphasizing the word extremely. In other words, "This isn't for you." Reacher just nodded. "Those are the ones I want to see." The salesman blinked, confused. He thought he'd heard wrong. "Excuse me, what did you say?" "I want to see the most exclusive models in the store." For a moment, time seemed to stop. The sales assistant looked at a colleague who just shrugged, lost. He expected Reacher to burst out laughing, to reveal that it was a prank. But none of that happened. Reacher stood firm, silent. He just waited. The frustration on the attendant's face was evident. He wanted to send that man away. He thought he was wasting his time on someone without a penny. But what if he was wrong? What if that simple guy was actually someone with more power and money than everyone else in the place? The salesman let out a long, theatrical sigh and with an impatient wave of his hand said, "Right, if that's what you want." He turned abruptly and started walking towards the most restricted wing of the showroom, the VIP area. He sincerely hoped that the man with the gaunt face would have the sense to give up and walk out of there on his own. But Reacher didn't hesitate. He just followed him, as calmly as ever, as if he owned the place. As the two of them disappeared down the corridor that led to the ultra-exclusive customer room, the employees exchanged puzzled glances. It was like watching something that didn't make any sense, and yet no one dared to intervene. In the impeccably quiet room, the sound of the salesman's expensive shoes tapped rhythmically on the marble. He walked in a hurry, as if he just wanted to get out of the situation. Reacher, on the other hand, was walking calmly, unhurriedly, without a hint of discomfort, and that only made the salesman angrier. When they reached the area where the most unattainable jets were displayed like a king's crown, the attendant stopped abruptly and pointed at the first model with total disinterest. "Falcon LX900, he said without even bothering to look at Reacher. "Italian leather seats, comfortable, ideal for intercontinental flights." His voice was dry, impatient. He wasn't presenting the jet. He was testing Reacher. Let's see if he backs off now. But Reacher didn't even blink. He just watched the aircraft carefully, hands in his pockets, as if he were examining old military equipment. Interesting, but still not the most exclusive, is it? The salesman closed his eyes briefly, trying to contain his irritation. He grudgingly turned on his heels and pointed at another jet without the slightest enthusiasm. "Very well, Gulfstream G7500. He sighed audibly, crossed his arms and finished. $70 million. Each word came out as a provocation. He wanted to see Reacher choke on the price. He wanted him to recoil, to cringe, to admit that he didn't belong in that world. But Reacher just nodded serenely. Impressive, but it's still not the most exclusive, is it? It was like an invisible punch. The salesman froze, his face twisted between contempt and incredulity. A bitter laugh escaped. "You've got to be kidding." The mask fell. He pointed his finger at Reacher, his eyes full of fury. "Listen here, sir, this isn't a circus." He approached, trying to overwhelm him with his presence. "You can't just come in here and waste my time." His speech was now full of arrogance. He gesticulated wildly. "This isn't a shopping mall or a museum," he said dismissively, looking around. "We don't sell souvenirs. We don't cater to curious tourists." His tone became more aggressive. "This isn't an amusement park for you to play at being rich." Reacher remained calm. Not a muscle in his face moved. His gaze was fixed, calm, and silent. But the salesman wasn't finished. Now he wanted to hurt with words. "We're talking about real money here," he spat coldly. "This is for big people, people with power, people who command things you'll never understand." He looked Reacher up and down with an almost visceral contempt. "What about you? You look like anything but someone with money. You look like some kind of loser." The word loser was spoken like a blade. The entire showroom froze. It was as if time had stopped. The salesman thought he had won. He thought that man would drop everything and walk out of there in shame. But Reacher didn't back down. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't make a fuss. He just kept the same impassive look on his face. And then he gave a slight smile. Small, almost imperceptible, but it was enough to send a shiver down the salesman's spine. Reacher took a step forward. Now he was the one looking down. The salesman felt his chest tighten. Something wasn't right. That reaction just was from someone who was in control of the situation. Reacher tilted his head slightly and said, with the cutting calm of someone who doesn't need to prove anything to anyone, "Can I see the most exclusive jet now?" The salesman's face lost color. His lips opened, but no words came out. For the first time, he was floored. His mind couldn't understand how that man was still there, still firm, still looking into his eyes, without flinching. He should have been embarrassed. He should have run out of the store. But no, Reacher stood there, immobile and smiling, underestimated, ridiculed, but still there, unwavering. The tension now filled the room like smoke, dense, almost suffocating. The salesman, once self-assured, now looked lost. Because nobody could take that kind of contempt without breaking down. Nobody. Except that man. And that terrified him. Cold sweat began to trickle down the back of the salesman's neck. Something was wrong, very wrong. But after everything he had said, backing down was not an option. If he gave space to that nobody, his authority would be ruined. He needed to double down. "Oh, still don't get it?" He let out a dry laugh, desperately trying to regain control. This place isn't for everyone. His gaze narrowed, his voice now laced with debauchery. "Maybe you think you're impressing someone with this insistence, but honestly..." He took a step forward, his eyes now brimmed with contempt. "All you're doing is wasting our time." The showroom was at a standstill. Some of the staff could already see what was happening, but fear prevented them from getting involved. The silence was absolute, almost suffocating. "This is no joke, sir," he said with an icy, almost threatening tone. He pointed around with a theatrical gesture. "These jets cost hundreds of millions. Serious business is done here. Real men come through these doors." And then he glared at Reacher with pure contempt. "And you're not one of them." The silence fell as heavy as lead, but Reacher didn't look away. He didn't even blink. His expression remained serene, firm, unyielding. And at that moment, the salesman felt something he hadn't expected. Doubt. Something broke inside him. Had he misjudged? Was that simple man really someone much bigger than he seemed? He tried to push the thought away, but it persisted. So he decided he would play his last card. He moved even closer, inches from Reacher's face. He growled between his teeth. "You've wasted enough time here." And with venom in his gaze. "And you've wasted our time too." He pointed towards the door. "Now, get out." The showroom plunged into a sepulchral silence. Reacher took a step back. The salesman felt a rush of relief. At last. Victory, he thought. But only for a second. Because Reacher didn't leave. He just let out a soft sigh. He looked around calmly, as if taking in his surroundings. And then he faced the salesman again with the same enigmatic smile as before. Calm, but with something indefinable, almost disturbing. The salesman felt a chill. It didn't make sense. "And now?" he asked impatiently, already on the verge of collapse. Reacher finally spoke. His voice was low, controlled, but loaded with a firmness that cut like a razor. "Are you sure?" The salesman frowned. "Sure of what?" Reacher didn't answer immediately. He just looked at him. Then he tilted his head slightly, and with more weight in his words, he repeated, "Are you sure?" The chill down the salesman's spine intensified. What did that mean? Why was he still standing there so confident? He should have left a long time ago, but he was still standing firm. The salesman tried to keep his posture, but something slipped through his fingers. The feeling of control was disappearing, and he hated it. Reacher refused to leave. The salesman doubled down on his aggression, but then came that unexpected question. "Are you sure?" And for the first time, the salesman hesitated. The showroom remained frozen in time. The question reverberated in the attendant's mind like a dark warning. He should feel victorious. He had given an order. He had been clear. That man was an intruder. But why didn't he seem to be in charge? Reacher stood there, firm, serene, as if everything was going exactly as he had planned. Then another sound broke the silence. Footsteps. Quick, precise. The salesman turned on the spot, expecting to see the security guard coming to reinforce his decision. But it wasn't the security guard. It was the store manager. The blood disappeared from the salesman's face in an instant. The manager was walking with determination, his eyes fixed on what was happening. And the clerk understood at that moment that he had made a serious mistake. The manager stopped beside them. He glanced quickly at Reacher, then at the sales assistant, then he frowned. "What's going on here?" His voice was calm, but with the authority of someone who wouldn't accept empty answers. The clerk tried to react. He straightened up. He forced a nervous smile. "Ah, sir, everything under control." That man, Jun, looked at Reacher with resentment. "He was wasting our time. I've already asked him to leave." The manager remained silent for a few seconds. Then he let out a low, dry laugh, and that was enough for the attendant to realize it was over. The manager crossed his arms. He looked him straight in the eye. "Wasting your time?" The shiver returned in full force. The sales assistant tried to hold his pose, but his mask was already cracked. "I just explained that we sell exclusively to customers with great financial capacity." The manager arched an eyebrow. Customers with great financial capacity, huh? The salesman swallowed. It was then that the manager turned to Reacher, and for the first time he really smiled. "Mr. Reacher, it's an honor to welcome you to our store." The salesman froze. His heart skipped a beat. "What? Mr. Reacher?" His eyes went wide. The air was gone from his lungs. No. The salesman turned slowly towards Reacher, and in that instant, everything made sense. The face, the striking features, the attentive gaze, the calm but firm posture, that serene smile that never wavered. Now he recognized it. The ground seemed to disappear beneath his feet. He wasn't facing just anyone. He was facing Jack Reacher. His legs threatened to give way. He tried to say something, to justify, to give some explanation. But no words came out. He just stared at Reacher, completely bewildered, waiting for him to say something, to ease the impact, to say that it was just a misunderstanding. But Reacher just smiled, calm, silent, like he'd known everything all along. The manager, now looking more serious, intervened. "I hope you've been treated with the respect you deserve, Mr. Reacher." Reacher let out a low chuckle, but didn't reply. The manager noticed on the spot. His smile disappeared. Slowly, he turned to the salesman, who felt the blood drain from his face for the second time. "Can we talk in private?" The phrase sounded like a sentence. The manager didn't even blink as he spoke. The salesman knew, at that very moment, he knew he was ruined. But it was then that Reacher delivered the final blow. He turned slowly to the clerk, and in a calm, low voice, but sharp as a razor, he said, "You know, the richest people are usually the ones who least need to prove something." Silence. It was like being punched in the chest, invisible but devastating. The salesman understood. That phrase was for him. He was exposed. He was naked in front of the truth. Reacher then turned to the manager as if nothing had happened and said naturally, "Now yes, can we see the most exclusive jet?" And he walked calmly into the store without looking back. When the manager recognizes Reacher and treats him with respect, the salesman finally understands the size of his mistake. But it's Reacher's cutting phrase that reduces him to nothing. Now, who's out of place? The showroom remained silent, but everything there had changed. Before, the salesman was the center of the scene, spreading arrogance as if he owned the place. Now, he was just a figure, an empty man. He couldn't face anyone, pale, hands trembling as if he were awaiting sentencing. Next to him, the manager kept a firm expression, full of disappointment. "Mr. Reacher, once again, I apologize on behalf of our team." Reacher, observing everything with his usual calm, only smiled slightly. "No need to apologize." The manager blinked, surprised. The salesman, overwhelmed by the situation, raised his eyes with difficulty. Reacher continued, his voice serene without a shadow of rancor. "I've seen this before, many times." He looked directly at the clerk. "I bet you've seen it too." The salesman swallowed. "People being judged by the clothes they wear, by the way they walk, by what others think they can or can't buy." Reacher took a deep breath. He put his hands in the pockets of his jeans. "The problem is that these judgments are almost never as simple as they seem." He took a step forward. "You looked at me and thought you knew who I was." The salesman lowered his head. He didn't have the strength to answer. "You thought I was just anyone, a broken dreamer who came here just to dream of something he'd never have." He paused. The words hung heavy in the air. "But what if I was?" The salesman looked up, surprised. Reacher tilted his head slightly, studying his reaction. What if I was just a guy with no money, a dreamer who couldn't afford to buy anything here? Would that mean I didn't deserve respect? The salesman held his breath. The store, once full of luxury and movement, now seemed like a silent courtroom. Reacher smiled slightly, but his words still carried the weight of a final judgment. Because, at the end of the day, it was never about money. He looked around, and at that moment, he was talking to everyone. Doesn't matter if someone comes in here wearing a $20,000 suit or a 20 real shirt. Everyone deserves respect. The manager nodded slowly, impressed. The sales assistant seemed smaller, shrunk inside himself, sunk by his own arrogance. Reacher let out a soft sigh. He put his hand on the boy's shoulder. You're still young, you can still learn. The salesman felt a lump in his throat. The question is, do you want to? The question hung in the air. The salesman didn't answer. Reacher didn't need anything else. He took a step back and turned to the manager. Now yes, we can continue the tour. And he walked on. No rancor, no superiority, just with the confidence of someone who knows they've just taught one of life's most valuable lessons. The manager followed him in silence, respectfully. The salesman stayed behind. He stood still, as if the world was spinning around him, and he couldn't keep up. He looked down at his hands, as if he were holding in them the real weight of everything he had done. And for the first time, he felt ashamed of himself. Jack Reacher didn't humiliate, he taught. He turned contempt into a lesson. And now all that remained was the question, had the salesman learned anything from all this? The luxury jet showroom soon resumed its routine of appearances and sophisticated silence. But something had changed, and everyone could feel it. The employees, who had barely noticed Reacher before, now exchanged discreet whispers, visibly shaken by what they had witnessed. The salesman, he was still there, pale, motionless, as if trapped in time. But outside, a new story was already beginning. A woman who was watching everything from a distance had recorded every second of the interaction with her cell phone. From the first humiliation to Reacher's last lesson, everything was recorded, and the repercussions were immediate. The scene went viral. The name of the store, once synonymous with prestige, was now associated with haughtiness and prejudice. Social networks exploded. Newspapers, portals, and TV programs talked about nothing else. Faced with the storm, the board met in a hurry. The verdict was clear: radical changes. A few days later, the company announced a complete overhaul of its customer service. But the most significant change fell on the salesperson. After being trashed on social media, he tried to disappear from the spotlight, but inside the store, his situation was untenable. He was summoned to a final meeting. The manager looked at him sternly. "You know why you're here, right?" "Yes, I do," replied the sales assistant, his eyes downcast. "You made a serious mistake. It wasn't just disrespecting a customer. You put the company's reputation at risk." The weight of the guilt seemed to double on his shoulders. "I know, and I regret it." The manager looked at him for a while in silence. "So tell me, what have you learned?" The salesman hesitated, then looked up. "That we shouldn't judge anyone by their appearance." The manager raised an eyebrow. "That's it? That respect should always come before anything else." The manager nodded. "And you're willing to change?" "Yes, I am." After another tense silence, the manager continued. "The store has decided not to fire you, but that doesn't mean that everything will continue as before." The sales assistant's eyes widened in surprise. "I still have a job?" The manager smiled slightly. "Yes, but in a different position." He would be demoted to customer service assistant. His new mission, to personally greet each person who entered the store, without judgment, without distinction. If he wants to continue, he'll have to learn the hard way. The sales assistant didn't protest. He knew it was fair. And for the first time since it happened, he felt that maybe this was his chance to start again. As the store struggled to rebuild its image, many expected a statement from Jack Reacher. But as always, true to his quiet and resolute manner, he didn't make a fuss. When asked by reporters about what had happened, he just smiled and said calmly, This has already been resolved in the best possible way. No rancor, no revenge, just Reacher being Reacher. But deep down, he knew it had made a difference. He never wanted to cancel anyone. He wanted people to learn. And this time, someone did. With the store willing to change and the salesperson undergoing his own transformation, Reacher's story wasn't just another viral video. It was a real example of evolution. In the end, it was never about status or figures. It was always about respect. And that is the real wealth that everyone should strive for. This was the impressive story of how a simple gesture, or the lack of one, can reveal so much about who we are. Jack Reacher didn't just surprise, he taught. In a silent but powerful way, he left behind a lesson in empathy, humility, and humanity. And now I want to know, do you believe that nowadays we still judge people too much by appearances? Have you experienced something similar, or do you know someone who has? Comment below. I'd love to hear your story. And if this video made you think, share it with someone who needs to remember that respect isn't about looks or bank accounts. Oh, and of course, subscribe to the channel to keep following stories that touch the heart and challenge the way we see the world. Want to get even more emotional? Click on one of the videos here and discover another true story that will inspire you. See you in the next episode.